Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone in the franchise world. My name is Paul Segreto, and this is Franchise Today. Along with me is my co-host, Stan Friedman from the great city of Atlanta. How are you, Stan?
Anything but hot, Paul. I think winter's here to stay, but it's not too bad. But happy to be with you. Happy New Year, my friend.
Yeah, Happy New Year. And as you talk about, heat and hot and cold, all the people in the north certainly that were reveling in 70-degree weather over the holidays. I saw yesterday something posted from one of our friends at Friedman Public Relations that the temperature was a nice, cool 0 degrees.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. It's crazy. It's crazy, but true. I don't know who believes in global warming or whatever climate change, but Christmas in Atlanta was 78 or 80 degrees, and I'm sitting here looking at 24, 25 right now, and it's just a week and a half later. But I guess it's supposed to be 20, 25 right about now. So
I mean, we're enjoying some warm daytime temperatures of about mid-60s, and I know another one of our PR friends, dear to both of us, Rhonda Sanderson, is over in South Florida enjoying being away from the Chicago cold. So here's a shout out to Rhonda. We're trying to get her on Franchise Today in the coming weeks.
Thanks for the warning, Paul. I mean, hey, Rhonda down in South Florida, huh? Rhonda, somebody's got to be there. I guess it ought to be you.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Stan, today we have as our guest Pete Baldine, a longtime industry professional and president of Moran Family of Brands. But before we go there, I want to talk some about our front of the house.
So what have you got working?
Actually, even before talking about front of the house, we're starting our 7th year on Franchise Today. What started out as a labor of love 7 years ago when I had no clue where this would go. Here we are 7 years later. You've joined into the mix, a great addition to the show, and some great things ahead for Franchise Today. And it's hard to believe. 7 years. Think of what has transpired during all that time.
I still get a lot of social media comments, texts, and emails from those that I deemed to be my friends who are saying, hey, we still don't know what we're doing. So 7 years later, who'd have dreamed you'd have been doing what you're doing, and 7 years later, some people are questioning whether either of us ever did or do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the things in front of the house I want to talk to does talk about some oldies but goodies and changes that are made back to our friends at the Golden Arches. In December, McDonald's transformed one of its Hong Kong branches into the world's first McDonald's Next, an evolved version of the brand that strives to be modern and progressive. The interesting thing, Stan, is we've talked about National Labor Relations Board ruling and increased minimum wage and stuff, that they chose Hong Kong to develop their model for the future. Gone are the red and yellow color palette, harsh lighting. In their place is a sleek black and white logo, ambient lighting, glass and metallic interiors, and get this, a really ultra-modern salad bar. It's filled with 19 ingredients, include 2 choices of salad-based greens, 2 kinds of cheese, 3 flavors of sauce, and, of course, quinoa. What do they call it? I pronounce it quinoa. It's quinoa, I believe.
Quinoa, yeah.
Yeah, and they're trying to elevate the fast food experience that they're trying to pull out of downward sales the last umpteen quarters. But it is interesting that they're still going to have the same menu, but that they're testing this in Hong Kong where labor costs are a lot lower, which leads into another thing that I saw online that does tie into the NLRB ruling, which is a new look in franchise liability. Previous law held that a franchisor that did not directly or employ or control a franchisee's workers was exempt from joint liability for employment practices happening at the local franchisee unit. And, of course, the new NLRB standard now considers a franchisor as a joint employer, not only if it exercises direct control, but also if it has indirect or even, get this, potential control, but the change could have devastating effects on thousands of small business owners. So says a friend of the show, Daryl Johnson, chief executive at FranData. He says that according to research that they've performed of at least 40,000 businesses operating in more than 75,000 locations, he feels they're all at risk because of the recent ruling, which he says jeopardizes the ability of franchise small business owners to hire, schedule, and set the salaries of employees, or even guidelines for the franchisees' hiring practices with employees. And the most obvious example of that widening scope, of course, comes back to the Golden Arches, which they now have said it was the franchisor's comprehensive computer system, which tracks labor usage and costs as one of the way it controls franchisees' operations. And, of course, the NLRB and McDonald's are in a legal battle right now, and it was supposed to actually kick off 2 weeks ago, but it has been delayed right now as the judge has requested some more information. Really interesting times there. But, of course, as we've said over the last few weeks, as we've had Catherine Monson on and Lynette McPhee and Shelley Sun, and we talked about NLRB's effects, and as you succinctly pointed out, it's not all doom and gloom. And there was a great article on BizCom Associates Franchise Public Relations site, and they said how franchising helped the economy recover in 2015. And they go on to say that the economic recovery owes a big thanks to the growth of franchisors and the development of franchise networks across the U.S. and abroad. It's safe to say the American dream is alive and well, and they point out four things. Acquisitions showcase buying power, brand strength, and a positive outlook for future brand growth. And, of course, they go on to talk about one of their clients, the Dwyer Group, which, of course, had another record year, not only in revenues but also in adding brands to their mix. The article goes on also to say America embraced discretionary spending that signaled record growth for many franchisors. It was a year of transparency for restaurants as well as the restaurant industry continues to add jobs to the economy. And then, of course, to me, one of the deciding factors is really the business success of franchise organizations that was translated into a surge of philanthropic endeavors. So really, franchising, there is a bright outlook. Of course, we do have some challenges, Stan, as we know with the NLRB ruling, and of course the looming increase of minimum wage.
Well, some of that's going to just be, as is the case in everything every year, whatever comes and confronts us, in sports as in business, those who make it are those who adjust. And so we just need to take the punches as they keep on coming, make the necessary adjustments, and we'll be here a year from now to talk about the coming year's adjustments in 2017. It is what it is, and I don't think we can change it, so we have to adjust what we do about it. And I think that, as we've all said all along, it's not being made any easier for us. But I'll tell you, Paul, I've got a front-of-the-house issue that kind of further validates and talks to some of what you've just described in terms of franchise growth and development despite all that. The 37th Annual Franchise 500 hit the newsstands the first of the year. And how exciting was that for me? When I was still a franchisor, I used to count down till I was able to go pick up that new addition to see where Wing Zone or Blimpie or where any of us that I was involved with were landing on that sacred list. And the 37th Annual 500 came out with some interesting stats. The 37th Annual 2016 500 encompasses 462,585 individual businesses that are the units of all those 16,000, all the different brands, 17 different categories that make up the 500. And 4 out of the top 10 spots in the listings this year, no surprise, came from the quick service food sector, but somebody tops the list this year for the first time, and I'll tell you who that is in just a minute. Some of the other interesting stats this year, it's the first time since 2010 that a former category member has reclaimed number one position in their category. And the most growth this year was seen in the maintenance category, thanks to what would usually be perceived as low cost of entry in that sector, hotels and motels with sound unit economics and stellar corporate oversight, and lastly, from home improvement, which is thriving as homeowners are investing in their properties once again post-recession. As in all prior years, the rankings for Entrepreneur's Franchise 500 are done with a methodology and some metrics that aren't publicly shared, but they're put together using exclusive formulas that take into account objective and qualifiable and quantifiable factors. They employ an independent CPA firm to analyze all the financial data, and the most important factors that go into the selection of the Franchise 500 are the financial strength and stability of the brands, their growth rates, and the size of the systems. All franchises are given a cumulative score, and then the 500 franchises with the highest cumulative scores comprise the Franchise 500 in ranking order. We don't have time to go through too much of this, Paul, but I would like to give a shout-out and congratulate the top 10 franchisors on this year's Franchise 500, and we'll count them down from 10th place, Anytime Fitness, number 9, Denny's, number 8, Dunkin' Brands, number 7, 7-Eleven, McDonald's in number 6 place, Subway number 5, ProSource in 4th, ServPro, Supercuts, Hampton Inns, and then number 1, how appropriate, Paul, because you usually bust me every week before we start this podcast, chomping down on my Jimmy John's. Well, in first place, for the first time in Entrepreneur's ranking of the 500, Jimmy John's claims that position. And a couple of other noteworthies that I just want to give some shout-outs to, our good friend Pete Lindsay and Gordon Logan. Sports Clips soared 20 spaces and landed number 16 this year. And an astounding leap comes from another of our good friends, Jonathan Barnett in Denver. OxyFresh just absolutely threw rocket fuel and moved an astounding 259 positions.
Wow.
From previous ranking of number 475 last year to number 216 this year. Jonathan and your team, kudos, congratulations, and I'm sure a lot of people that hear this are going to be seeking you out at IFA so that they can learn what you're doing and grab a nugget or two from you. So congratulations to OxyFresh Carpet Cleaning and all of the other honorees in this year's Entrepreneur Franchise 500.
It's absolutely fantastic. That's some tremendous jumps, and I know, as I mentioned, the Dwyer Group, I think I had read 7 of their brands were listed in the Entrepreneur 500. Truly an astounding number.
Speaking of the Dwyer Group, I caught something on Facebook this morning. I saw a picture of Mark and Mary Kay Liston standing side by side with Dr. Ben Carson as he came to visit the Dwyer Group yesterday as part of his campaign trailing.
Yep. I saw that too. Very interesting. Well, we could talk all day, obviously, about the news and about what's going on in franchising and, of course, the Franchise 500. But let's get to today's guest. You know, in an industry that has long been perceived as not having any glitz or appeal, co-branding has enabled Moran's brands to build and strengthen relationships with both customers and franchisees alike. For customers, it offers a one-stop shop of convenient quality service. For franchisees, it offers an efficient business model that builds loyalty and repeat business while minimizing overhead. To these points, our discussion today with Pete Baldine, president of Moran Family of Brands, will address the efficiencies of co-branding. We'll also talk some about technology challenges with today's vehicles, the necessity of higher skill level for technicians, and, of course, issues that we talked about earlier in the show as we opened up regarding NLRB and minimum wage facing franchise and independent businesses alike. Pete, welcome to Franchise Today.
Well, thank you, Paul and Stan. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's great to be on the show with you.
Well,
happy to have you with us, Pete.
Yeah, we love having you on the show, Pete. We've got a lot of synergies, a lot of past together in a lot of different ways that a lot of our listeners might not even be aware of. Myself, having been in your position at Moran Industries back in 1990 as president of Moran Industries, which, of course, was the former entity, the Moran Family of Brands, with multiple locations or multiple brands at the time, Mr. Transmission, Multi-State, Dr. Nix, and then I came aboard with Atlas Transmission. And then, of course, you and I crossed paths when I became probably the franchisee from hell, as you and I had some interesting dealings across the table, so to speak. But it's so great that all of that is back in our rearview mirror, and sometimes situations precipitate themselves in a way that's not quite the way we want them to start out, but certainly at least they're, as I said, in our rearview mirror. So I really do welcome you to franchise today.
Well, thanks, Paul, and you know, we go through some of those challenges sometimes, and I think that the good thing is that people like you and I and Stan know how to take those situations and learn from them and become better professionals and better people from those experiences, and certainly I think we've done that, and also grown a very nice friendship in the process.
Absolutely.
What doesn't kill us makes us stronger, and
that's right. That's right.
I can think of no place where we have over the years been able to, in this business of franchising, a lot of us change shirts, but we collect people. I say that all the time. When you get tagged up with somebody that's worth knowing, just because they've changed jobs or changed brands, or you have, is not a reason to let go of that relationship, because you're going to need to know that person again as they are you. And they are a small and growing, but small fraternity or sorority of those of us that have managed to know each other in different places and times. But back to the future. If somebody was worth knowing then, they're worth knowing now.
That's right. Speaking of worth knowing, guys, I can't tell you how honored I am to be on the show. When you mentioned the fact that recent guests were Catherine Monson, Lynette McKee, and Shelley Sun, I don't know how I'm going to follow up behind those, but those are three great franchise professionals right there.
I'll tell you one.
Maybe we're trending. Maybe we're trending in the other direction.
I was going to say, Pete, I don't think you're going to follow up with the same stylish shoes that all three of them wear. That's for sure.
Well, that's true.
And then Pete, it's probably something we would have saved for later, Paul, but what the heck? Baxter is on next week, so are we heading, is the spiral going in a different direction? I don't think so. You guys are great.
I hope not.
We're not talking politics with him, though, I promise.
But there's no telling where Baxter might take it.
Well, I have the controls at the dashboard. I could easily mute him. Something I can't do on social media as quickly as I can online, that's for sure.
Right.
So Pete, knowing the automotive business, as basically I cut my teeth not only in the automotive business but in the transmission side of the business in franchising, it was a huge part. It was my entire career from 1982 until 2001. And obviously I saw some of the early stages of some major changes in the industry that, really were quite trying as more technology was added to vehicles, creating poorer unit economics for franchisees. And I think what Moran Family of Brands have done to capitalize or to address all those in a very successful way is co-branding, being able to have, multiple brands under the same roof, economies of scale with labor and rent and what have you. So with that in mind, give us a little bit of insight into, the co-branding, philosophy, and of course any additional efficiencies that you might have, and also let us know about the different brands that are under the Moran family of brands at this time.
You bet. Thanks, Paul. So first I would point out that as you did earlier, this is not considered to be one of the sexier type of brands, or industries out there. It's an older, mature industry, and but when you dig into it and you look at the numbers, it is a great business opportunity because the growth in the market continues to take place in a big way. And if I can just share a few numbers with you,
absolutely.
Before we talk about co-branding, the automotive aftermarket is a $300 billion plus industry. We have gone to the point where we've got over 254 million registered vehicles on the road. That, by the way, is up from 2003. In 2003, we had 216 million registered vehicles, so we're up to over 254 million now. Americans drive over 3 trillion miles a year. Average age of the vehicle has just jumped tremendously. In 2003, it was 7 years old. Today, it's 11.4 years.
Wow.
Transmission repair has gone from 2.3 billion industry in 2003 to 3.6 billion today. And another factor that impacts our business is what's happened to competitively to dealerships. Quickly, we have, in the year 2000, there were 28,000 dealerships across the U.S. That's down to 18.5 thousand today. So we've lost almost 10,000 dealerships in the last 15 years. J.D. Power and Associates says that won't stabilize until we hit about 15,000 dealerships. So they're looking at another 3,000 to 3,500, to close over the next 3 to 5 years. Each dealership represents about 15 service bays. So with what's closed in the last 15 years, that's 150,000 fewer service bays.
Wow.
So when you look at our industry, the numbers are all pointing in the right direction for this to continue to be a very solid business opportunity for franchisees.
Pete, when you talk about...
Not without its challenges, not without its challenges, but certainly a great opportunity.
So before you get into the co-branding piece and talk some about that, some of what you've just shared begs some questions that kind of occur to me. And that would be, what percentage of your new franchisees are coming to you as conversions from independent already in the aftermarket business in one way, shape, or form versus those that are startup? Most
of them are startup, Stan. Very small percentage are conversions. The mom and pop shops are struggling with some of the challenges we'll talk about as to why we moved into co-branding. A lot of the small operators just don't have the resources to compete in today's market. Okay, the diagnostic equipment that they need, requires some capital. Staying on top of the technology with today's cars is the biggest issue. And for smaller independent mom and pop type shops, there are some challenges for them in staying on top of the technology and being able to provide quality customer service.
So to me, it makes me feel like those types of challenges at the unit economic level would be an inducement for conversion franchising, that independent guys that are finding it more and more difficult each year to maintain a competitive position in the market. I guess it would be, in my mind, be a way to maybe save them from themselves. So I'm kind of surprised to hear you say that there are fewer than more that are converting.
Well, we're being very selective with that, Stan, because the guys that come to you are typically guys that are having a hard time making it and they're in trouble. You know,
so they're already too far down the road.
They're already too far down the road. They waited too long, and they're in trouble. And they're hoping that by becoming part of the system, you're going to save them. You know, so we don't focus a great deal on conversions. We do some, we do some, but we don't focus a great deal on them. Not that opportunity isn't out there; it is, but we tend to do better with franchisees that come from a professional management and leadership background than franchisees that come from, the automotive industry itself.
So tell us more about who those are. What's the profile?
Yeah. So the profile is really, we see a lot of people in the 45 to 60-year-old range. They are typically people who are having a career change. Either they've decided to make it themselves, or somebody's decided to make it for them. Where they've been downsized from corporate America. They have always had a desire to be entrepreneurial, but they maybe haven't taken that opportunity. And when they have this career change going on, they decide that now's the time to do it, that if they don't do it now, they'll never do it later, and they want to control their own destiny. A lot of them want to control their own time, have more time for their families, cut out the corporate travel, They're professionals that have good sales and leadership characteristics, and those are the people that really work best for us. And when they have a hobby interest in automotive, which a lot of people do, they liked working on cars when they were younger, or they restore cars, or they're into motorcycles. Those people become very passionate about our industry, even though they may not have come from our industry.
Interesting.
So, Pete, not only from a repair standpoint, but one of your brands is also, as I refer to, as the fun part of the business. So let's take an opportunity to identify the various brands under Moran Family of Brands, and tell us how this might tie together if a franchisee wants to do 2 or 3 of them under one roof.
Yeah, so Paul, great question. We were in a very unique situation back a number of years ago, because the brands, we have Mr. Transmission, which is obviously transmission and drivetrain repair, which is where you were. Mm-hmm. We have Milex Complete Auto Care, which is maintenance and general automotive repair. Okay. We have AltaMere Automotive Outfitters, which was recently rebranded earlier in the year, which is an automotive window tint and accessory business, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we have an offshoot of AltaMere Automotive Outfitters, which is SmartView Window Solutions. SmartView has nothing to do with automotive. We had with our automotive window film business with AltaMere for years, we had a number of customers that would call and want us to do window film in their homes. And at the time, we didn't do it because the window film products really weren't conducive to putting in a home. When people have big windows in their home, a lot of times it's a two-edged sword. They want the view, but at the same time, the sun coming in during different times of the day can do some damage, and also can make a room uncomfortable and have glare on the TV or whatever the case may be. So we used to turn those customers down, and a few years ago with the third generation films that came out, they became very conducive to using in a residential and commercial application. And so that's what we do through SmartView Window Solutions is it's residential and commercial window film, which is really a comfort issue, a energy savings issue, a UV protection issue. Okay, so it was a natural for us when the product stepped up and started meeting the needs that the customers were looking for in a residential situation. We came to the table with the SmartView brand.
Great stuff, Pete. Hey, we're talking with Pete Baldine, president of Moran Family of Brands, and you're tuned to Franchise Today, which is brought to you by the Franchise Foundry, a business accelerator helping early-stage franchise systems stand up and work to become an emerging franchise brand as they move forward. The Franchise Foundry, headquartered in Houston, Texas, and headed by my co-host, Paul Segreto. Franchise Today is also brought to you by yours truly and FRM Solutions, where we offer robust out-of-the-box CRM and content management software solutions, all tailored specifically to the needs of franchisors to help them in the management of their relationships with both prospective and existing franchisees. Hey, Pete, a nugget about you personally that our audience has probably never known, except for those of us that are real close to you. So our day usually starts in the morning with maybe a workout and a newspaper, cup of coffee, and off to work we go. How does your day start, Pete, that's a little different than that?
7 days a week, Stan. I am out the door at 5:30 in the morning to go out to my barn and feed 22 horses. Regardless of what the weather is, there are no sick days. The horses want to be fed whether I'm sick or not, So my day starts with some early morning farm work every day. Sometimes evening farm work as well. As you guys were talking about the weather earlier, last night I was loading at about 8 o'clock last night. I was loading 90 bags of pine shavings into my horse trailer in weather that was 5 degrees below zero.
Ouch. Jeez.
Yeah.
What could be worse?
And thus
makes for some interesting days.
And thus I figured out why you are so enamored with bourbon, because after being outside, I imagine you come in and have a couple of glasses of bourbon to warm up the soul, that's for sure. Wow.
That's right.
God. Yeah, it's probably good that you don't do the bourbon at 5:30 in the morning.
No, that wouldn't work for me. It would definitely ruin my day.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of horsepower. 22 horses. Oh my God, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, my daughter's the brains behind that operation, though.
Wow.
I provide some marginal manual labor, and she's the brains behind it.
So going back to, co-branding, because I know there are definitely going to be some people interested both on the consumer or the candidate standpoint, as well as, a lot of the franchise executives, listening to this show that are looking at, expansion and growth, opportunities and initiatives for their own brands in this year, and trying to figure out, how co-branding works. I mean, I remember back in the day, and I mean, going back 20 plus years ago, and I don't remember, it was a Midwest automotive chain where they actually had an office on one side of the building that was for this brand, and an office on the left side of the building for the other brand, and the co-efficiency was in the middle because it was the shop, but it actually ran like two businesses, and that didn't work. I knew it wouldn't work back then, because why would you want two sets of management and arguing over which employees they need to take care of their commercial cars, in a priority type basis? And of course, there was also, some co-branding done out on the West Coast with the auto malls that popped up in the late 80s and early 90s, and they'd have 6 or 7 automotive chains within this shopping center, so to speak. And originally, it was supposed to be for some efficiencies in a one-stop environment, but of course, you had 7 different businesses operating independently, and there was a lot of competitive mudslinging and everything else, and those never worked. So what are the efficiencies of co-branding within Moran Family of Brands? And give us some examples on how this is being done.
So, Paul, those are great points. And the era that you're talking about was when, in the 80s it started, when, if you go back even further, okay, I grew up, in the 80s in the Jiffy Lube system. Matter of fact, another nugget, Stan, is I ran the very first Jiffy Lube in the country out in Salt Lake City, Utah in 1980.
Wow.
And the reason that business evolved was because prior to that we had neighborhood gas stations, okay?
Right.
2 service bays, you knew the mechanic, you had a relationship, okay? But then all those neighborhood gas stations went away. They turned into high-volume pumpers and convenience stores, okay? So there was a void in the market. And that created that void. Franchising entrepreneurs like Jim Hyman came out and created, the Jiffy Lube model. Okay, and then you had an evolution that took place where you had all these specialty shops that came up. Okay, transmission shops, muffler shops, brake shops, tune-up shops, you name it. Okay, what that did, I'm going to fast forward now. What that did for the customer was it eliminated the most important thing that the customer looks for, and that is a relationship with somebody that they can trust. Okay? Because what happened was the customer, in order to get their car serviced, was now going to 4 or 5 different shops during the course of the year. They'd go to the Quick Lube for an oil change. They'd go to the muffler shop. They'd go to each of these specialty shops, and they had no more relationships. Okay? Now, what we saw in back a number of years ago was a couple things happening. Okay, one was that those relationships were not very strong anymore, and the customers were craving for them. Okay, the thing that probably impacted it the most was the complexity of the cars coming out. When everything got computer controlled, you have cars now that have 6, 7 onboard computers on them. Okay. Great deal of complexity in these cars, and you don't get in these cars today and drive it around the block, and do a test drive and say, oh yeah, the transmission's not shifting right. The transmission's got to come out, because there are many things that there are many other systems in the car that can impact how that car is shifting. Okay, so that complexity was creating some changes in the marketplace. I'll give you a very graphic example of complexity in the cars that impacted one of our brethren in the automotive aftermarket. In the early 2000s, they came out with stainless steel exhaust components. Okay, Midas and Meineke used to do over 80% of their business was mufflers and exhaust work. Mm-hmm. Today, that number has dropped dramatically because with stainless steel components, you just don't change mufflers and exhaust components anymore. That business dried up, so it forced them to have to change their model and add several different services. Okay, we were in a unique position as Moran Family of Brands because we had these different models, okay, that I mentioned. We had, Mr. Transmission and Milex and AltaMere. And what we were able to do was look at our unique position and say, hey, we're in a better position than any of our competitors because we've got the expertise with these standalone models, and let's find a way to co-brand these under the same roof, okay, and create that one-stop shop for the customer in one place, okay, that allows them to meet all their automotive needs, okay, and also allows our franchisees to leverage their expenses, okay, to increase the frequency of use with their customers and to build those strong relationships. So we did a lot of research. We did a lot of work on how to, blend those models together under the same roof. And we did that knowing that eventually some of our Mr. Transmission franchisees would want to co-brand and add Milex to it. So it wasn't a matter of simply saying, well, we're going to get a bigger building. and we're going to get more real estate, because that would only impact the franchisees, that were new going forward. We wanted to find a way to do it so that all of our franchisees could benefit from it, and we did. And that was through doing it differently than what you described a few minutes ago, Paul. We focused on bay management. How do you make the business flow with different types of business coming in? One of the things that our Mr. Transmission franchise used to say is, I don't want to tie up a bay for an oil change when I could put a $2,000 transmission job on there. Okay,
right.
And so what we did was we developed a bay management system to teach the franchisees how to keep both sets of business flowing and stay productive. Okay, and we teach that in our training class, and we've had many of our existing franchisees add the co-brand, and almost all of our new franchisees come in with the co-branded model in place. The need for strong diagnostics today because of the complexity in the cars is tremendous, and that's a big part of what we built into our business system, as well. But the biggest thing is building the. I'm sorry, Stan. Go ahead.
I was going to say, how about the front of the house? As much as you're talking about what goes on in the back, you're making me sit here and live through some memories of why I do what I do, and my habits have changed. I used to be a guy that went to the dealership for everything, and I've got a Tires Plus store a couple of miles from my house that they earned my tire business first, but they a little bit at a time got into my life to where they almost do all the service on the 3 Friedman family cars, because I trust the daylights out of the guy at the front of that store. He's been there for years, and he has saved me more times than I could prove. He's saved me money on things where, Honda might have said you need a transmission. He's going, maybe you do, but I don't think so. And I got another 50 or 60 or 80 or 100,000 miles out of a vehicle for a whole lot less money than it would have cost me. So you have to deliver it in that bay and in the back of the house, but you better trust the guy at the counter too, don't you? Don't you need to?
Stan, you hit on such a critically important point in our model, and why co-branding makes sense. Okay, in the transmission business, which is our biggest individual model, is Mr. Transmission. But in the transmission business, your customers don't need you with any kind of frequency. Okay, you get that job, and Paul, remember the day when, back when you were in, what was one of the biggest things that you did for advertising? It was trying to get a strong, upfront position in the yellow pages.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, it was the cheap, transmission fluid changes. I mean, remember,
that's right.
I go back to 1982 with Mr. Transmission, when my father-in-law was a franchisee, and we had the old comedian George Goebel with his face in the front of a transmission saying, "Wally, Wally, come into Mr. Transmission for a fluid change." So yes, I remember those days.
And Paul, I still have copies of some of those commercials. But yeah, so the customer didn't need us with a great deal of frequency, but when they needed us right now. Okay.
Yep.
And having double truck yellow page ads that cost $70,000 a year was a terrible way to have to market yourself, right? So what happens with co-branding is now we have the customer, because of the maintenance and general automotive repair on the Milex side of the business, you're going to see that customer 4 to 5 times a year, okay? And guess what happens? As you see them 4 to 5 times a year and you build that relationship, okay, remember, only 7% of the customers at any given time need transmission repair work, okay? So if I'm building the relationship on the general repair side with the customers and they trust me, now when their transmission does fail, they're not going to the yellow pages, they're not going to the internet, they're not going anywhere, they're coming back to me because they have that trusting relationship, okay?
Sure.
And that's really what it's all about. Now, some of the additional benefits in co-branding are that you get the economies of scale with your advertising programs. The franchisees benefit from the fact that they now have two revenue streams with the same fixed overhead as they had if they had one brand. Because we built the system to where you didn't need more real estate, you didn't need more bays, you didn't need a bigger building. Your fixed overhead for a co-branded store is basically the same as it is for a single brand. But now you have two revenue streams, and you're leveraging all that fixed overhead.
I would also think it real quick, Stan, I wanted to just bring up a point. I think also what it does, when it was just transmission business, it was so hard to get entry-level people. You had to pay through the nose for labor of somebody that had a wealth of experience. Obviously, having a general automotive component, somebody can kind of matriculate and grow through the repair process from general to specialty, under that roof, which I think is great for the future, because I know at one time it was really a bleak outlook as to where we're going to get these highly qualified technicians in the future.
Absolutely true, Paul. You now have a training ground where you can bring a guy in on an entry-level basis. You can continue training them. And that brings us to another point from a training and tech support standpoint. So you might say, okay, so you're bringing people in from corporate America and they don't have, professional automotive experience. How in the world would they provide good customer service when at the same time you're talking about the complexity of the cars, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with the fact that they don't have, professional automotive experience, and the franchisee himself or herself is not a mechanic, right? And so we built some great components into the system, okay, from a training and tech support standpoint. And I'll run down what those are for you. One is we start with, particularly with new franchisees, we start with a technician screening process, okay? It's important to be able to screen those technicians to know whether or not they have the skill set that they need before you hire them. So we provide that screening process for the franchisees. We deliver to the franchisees 2, 3, 4 candidates that passed our 2 levels of screening, and then the franchisee can hire the one that they have the best chemistry with. Okay, so we help them screen, we help them find employees, we help them screen those employees. They have a technical software program in every store that gives them all the technical data that they need. Okay. In addition to that, another component is that, to your point, Paul, about growing technicians, we have on our intranet system, we have training and certification programs where the technicians can get further education. They're tested, and they get certifications when they complete the testing successfully. We go out with our tech department. We do major market tech seminars a number of times a year, where we're providing field training to franchisees, technicians. We get great turnout for those. We also provide, during regular business hours, a tech hotline. So if a franchise location is having difficulty with an installation or a repair, they're able to call our tech hotline, talk to a master mechanic who's going to provide them with the information that they need to get that car completed, delivered to the customer, collect the money, and get the next revenue-paying job up on the lift. We also, on our intranet system, have a tremendous library of service bulletins that the franchisees can access 24/7.
Pete, this begs a question or two, if I can. I was listening to your discussion about those entry-level mechanics that you help to learn more about the automotive business as they come in from point of entry. I would guess you have fewer than more of those. I guess you would be staffing more skilled labor. So the part of my question is 2 parts. The first part, with reference to minimum wage, is how do any of these minimum wage issues and increases in minimum wage look in your business as compared to food? And then the second part of my question is, with you doing all that you do to help provide screening processes and find candidates to screen to put into those positions. What concern does any of the NLRB joint employment issue cast upon that model for involvement? It's almost, as I've said every week almost since we started this, Paul, on one hand, those franchisors that are doing those responsible things to help ensure the growth of their franchisees' businesses and the sustainability of their unit economics, the more they do to help them, the more opportunity there is for NLRB to come back and say, see, he's a joint employer. So how do you balance that?
Yeah.
What's the balance?
Stan, great questions, and I'm going to try to answer them with the best information we have available right now. Okay, and as we all know, that can change, as this thing goes through the courts. But and it is a big concern in terms of the NLRB, regulations. But let me take those 2 points. First of all, we're not a minimum wage type employer. We're hiring primarily skilled, employees. And I'm going to use a word. I'm going to change the word that you used. You mentioned mechanics, which is what the industry has always called them. And today, the way the industry has changed, they're really not mechanics anymore. They're technicians. There's quite a distinction between the two. It's not as much turning wrenches as it is diagnosing, and you've got to be able to repair the job once you've properly diagnosed it. But almost every car that comes in, other than regular maintenance work, requires a lot of diagnostics today. So computer skills and technical skills are real critical. Therefore, we're not hiring people anywhere near the minimum wage. Okay. Now, that still leaves a concern, Stan, and that is, if they were to raise the minimum wage to, $15 an hour, like they're talking about, which is about our entry point. $14-15 an hour is where we hire a basic guy. Okay.
Sure, that's going to push it up for you too.
Then those guys naturally are going to want a corresponding raise. If a minimum wage guy comes in at $15 an hour, then your $15 an hour technician who's been, $6 above minimum wage, is going to be standing there with his hand out. So I don't know the answer to that one. That's a big concern from our standpoint in terms of, minimum wage increases and how they could drive, our higher end guys up. Okay. In terms of the screening, we make it very clear that we're assisting. We are not making any decisions. The hiring decisions are clearly in the hands of the franchisee. We do a basic HR screening that says, is this candidate a good employment candidate? Okay, and if they pass that basic screening, then they go to one of our technical people who screens them for their technical ability. Okay, I can't expect a new franchisee to hire a transmission builder and ask him technical questions and know whether or not all the answers are right. Now, we do provide other information to the franchisees that help them in terms of job descriptions and questions to ask and things like that. But we're going to screen them, and then, as I said, we're going to go back to the franchisee and say, here's 3 or 4 guys that are all good candidates. Now you can interview them and make your hiring decisions.
Well, see,
hopefully we won't be restricted with that.
Yeah, certainly there's a lot of room for debate as this target is moving, and I wish
right.
It was moving progressively. Instead, I feel like it's just moving around us, and no matter which way we turn, we're getting hit with it. And God only knows what the future is going to bring. As a matter of fact, I just saw a news post come across that the McDonald's franchising model is now under scrutiny in Europe by the EU. So it's exciting times ahead. There's a lot of different things going on affecting franchisors today, and it's definitely challenging times. Pete, I can't thank you enough for being our guest today on Franchise Today. It's a wealth of information, great information on co-branding. It was interesting how you walked right into the title of Strengthening Relationships in the Automotive Aftermarket with some of your comments and responses today. It was spot on, because I truly see what you're doing and what Moran Family of Brands doing about strengthening relationships. And as you said, that old relationship with your, neighborhood gas station mechanic was lost as we went into the era of specialties. And I think we're back around, and I think also this lends to strengthening the franchise relationship, which it's all about. Pete, thanks for being our guest today.
Thank you, Paul and Stan. I appreciate the opportunity to be on. It was great talking to both of you as always. And Paul, that your closing point there is really what it's all about. I think that Moran Family of Brands is positioned better than anyone else to bring back that old relationship that the driving consumer really looks for and really wants. So
Great.
Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it, and Happy New Year to you both.
Thank you so much, Pete. Looking forward to seeing you at IFA and chatting and catching up further.
You bet. Same here. Thanks, guys.
So, Stan, what do we have on the horizon for Franchise Today?
Well, we've got, in the coming weeks between now and convention, we've got a couple of iconic names that are already on the slate for February, and Jerry Darnell's going to join us, and CEO and president of IFA, Robert Crisante, is going to follow in the 3 or 4 year annual footsteps of his predecessor at IFA. Steve Caldera has always joined you, Paul, long before I did.
Yep.
Coming up to IFA convention with an appearance on Franchise Today, so we'll be seeing Mr. Crisante in front of convention. But as soon as next week, we're going to take a leap. We're going to have a good friend of ours who we love personally, but man, we bang heads on politics. But we're not going to do that here. We're going to have our good friend Steve Baxter, who we've all known and loved in franchising for a number of years. And Steve's in a global role with a company called Ecomi, E-K-O-M-I. And what Ecomi does is services some 14,000 companies globally, helping them increase their search traffic and conversion rates with their methodology to generate guaranteed authentic product and customer rating reviews. And Baxter is going to join us to talk about that, and we're going to have to keep the train on the tracks with him, Paul. We both know that that's going to take a little bit of management, but I think we can get it done.
Yes, I do. And also what I've been working on through the holidays is putting together the framework for a relaunch of our annual franchise legal series, which I hope that we can launch in the spring of 2016 of this year. I'm looking at, potentially 6 to 8 segments that'll be out of the normal scheduling of Franchise Today. Some of our past participants have been Lane Fisher, 4 or 5 years, Lee Play, the same, Arthur Pressman, Warren Lee Lewis, and many other franchise attorneys that have given so graciously of their time during that series. So really looking to take Franchise Today to new levels. Stan, boy, we're out of time. We're at the 90-second mark.
Yeah, we've hugged the clock again, Paul, but it was a fast-moving, fast-paced with 3 guys who love to talk. It gets a little challenging, but hey, we made it work again, and it's only a few weeks out until we're all in Houston in your hometown, Paul, for Franchise Expo South.
Yep, absolutely. Well, until next week, Stan, wishing you and everybody listening the best, the very best in this great, great thing we call franchising. Franchise Today is out.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. At American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.